My name is Marcus Chen, and at 24 I never expected my college graduation to become the day I finally stopped apologizing for who I am. Standing in that sea of black caps and gowns, waiting for my name to be called, I could hear my parents' whispered conversation 3 rows behind me in the family section. Such a disappointment. My mother's voice carried just loud enough for nearby families to hear. 4 years of college and still no direction. My father's response was equally cutting. Should have studied something practical like his sister. Engineering, not this liberal arts nonsense. I kept my eyes forward, hands folded in my lap, the familiar ache of their disapproval settling in my chest like an old friend. Before I reveal what happened when Dean Martinez made that announcement about the anonymous donor, let me know where you're watching from in the comments and hit that like button if you've ever felt like the family disappointment despite your best efforts. Growing up as the middle child in the Chen family meant living in perpetual shadow. My older sister Emma was the academic superstar, valedictorian MIT engineering degree, now designing aerospace systems for Boeing. My younger brother David was the athletic prodigy, state champion swimmer, full scholarship to Stanford Olympic training program. Then there was me, Marcus, who liked to read philosophy books and wrote poetry in his spare time. Our 2-story house in suburban Sacramento looked picture-perfect from the outside, complete with my mother's meticulously maintained garden and my father's luxury sedan always gleaming in the driveway. Inside, achievement charts tracked Emma's GPA and David's swim times. My name appeared sporadically, usually in smaller print, celebrating participation rather than victory. My parents, Dr. James Chen and Linda Chen, both successful professionals, Dad as a cardiologist, Mom as a financial advisor, had very specific ideas about success. It involved numbers, rankings, and clear career trajectories. My passion for literature and philosophy didn't translate well to their dinner table conversations about market portfolios and medical conferences. Poetry doesn't pay the bills, Dad would say whenever I mentioned my writing. When are you going to grow up and choose a real major? My junior year of high school, I won a regional creative writing competition. The prize was $1,000 and publication in a literary magazine. I rushed home, excited to share the news, only to find my parents celebrating David's latest swimming record. My announcement was met with polite nods before the conversation returned to David's potential for Olympic qualification. That night I found my prize check sitting unopened on the kitchen counter. Beneath it, my mother had placed college brochures for business and pre-med programs. The message was clear. Your achievements don't matter unless they align with our expectations. The pattern continued through high school and into college. When I chose to study English literature with a philosophy minor at UC Davis, my parents treated it like a phase I'd eventually outgrow. They attended Emma's MIT graduation with pride, taking hundreds of photos and hosting a celebration dinner for 40 relatives. When David signed his Stanford scholarship, they framed the contract and hung it in the living room. My college acceptance letter was acknowledged with a brief congratulations, before Dad asked if it was too late to change my major to something practical. During my freshman year, I discovered I had a talent for understanding complex literary theories and philosophical concepts. My professors encouraged me to pursue graduate studies, possibly even a PhD. Professor Williams, my Victorian literature instructor, told me I had the sharpest analytical mind she'd encountered in 15 years of teaching. But when I called home excited about potentially pursuing academic research, Mom's response was predictable. How much do professors make? Can you support a family on that salary? By sophomore year, I'd learned to keep my academic achievements to myself. Dean's List honors, paper presentations at undergraduate conferences, research assistantships. None of it seemed to matter to my parents. They'd ask about my grades as an afterthought, usually while praising Emma's latest promotion or David's swimming victories. The real turning point came during my junior year. Professor Martinez, who taught my modern philosophy seminar, approached me after class one afternoon. "Marcus," he said, "I've been thinking about our discussion on social impact through intellectual contribution. Have you ever considered that success might not always look like what others expect?" That conversation stayed with me for weeks. I began researching social entrepreneurs, writers and thinkers who had created meaningful change through unconventional paths. I discovered stories of people who had built significant wealth and influence through creativity, innovation, and intellectual pursuits. That summer, instead of taking the internship at my father's medical practice that he'd arranged, I quietly started a small business. Using skills I'd developed in my philosophy courses, critical thinking, argument construction, ethical reasoning, I began offering consulting services to local nonprofits. Many organizations needed help with grant writing, strategic planning, and ethical frameworks for their programs. My first client was a literacy foundation struggling to articulate their mission for a major grant application. Using techniques I'd learned in my writing courses, I helped them craft a compelling narrative that secured $150,000 in funding. They paid me $2,000 for 2 weeks of work. Word spread quickly through the nonprofit community. Organizations valued my unique combination of analytical thinking, writing skills, and genuine passion for social causes. By the end of summer, I'd earned more money than David made from his part-time coaching job. But I didn't tell my parents. Not yet. Senior year began with the familiar family dynamics. Emma visited for Thanksgiving, regaling everyone with stories of her engineering projects and substantial salary. David shared updates from Stanford, his Olympic training progress, and his girlfriend who was also a competitive swimmer. When attention turned to me, I offered vague updates about my coursework and thesis project. Still planning to be a perpetual student? Dad asked during dessert. Emma was making 6 figures by your age. Not everyone can be as practical as Emma, Mom added with false sympathy. We just hope you'll find your way eventually. Behind their condescension, I was building something they couldn't see. My consulting business had grown to include clients across California. I specialized in helping education-focused nonprofits, literacy programs, and organizations working with underprivileged youth. The work felt meaningful, but it was also lucrative. By Christmas break, I'd saved nearly $50,000. But the money wasn't the point. Through my work, I'd discovered something that would change everything. Many of the organizations I worked with were struggling with the same fundamental problem: lack of access to quality educational resources. Libraries in low-income communities were understaffed and underfunded. Schools lacked basic books and technology. Students had academic potential but no support systems. That's when I learned about UC Davis's campaign to build a new library. The university had been fundraising for 3 years, but they were still $2 million short of their goal. The proposed library would serve not just university students, but the broader Sacramento community, with special programs for literacy education and community outreach. During winter break, I met with the development office. I didn't go as Marcus Chen, college senior. I went as Marcus Chen, consultant and potential donor. The meeting was with Sarah Rodriguez, the university's director of major gifts. She outlined the library project's vision: a state-of-the-art facility that would serve as a community hub, offering literacy programs, technology access, and educational support for underserved populations. The building would include spaces for tutoring, after-school programs, and adult education classes. The impact would be transformative, Sarah explained. We estimate serving over 10,000 community members annually, many of whom currently lack access to these resources. I asked detailed questions about the timeline, the specific programs, and the naming opportunities. When she mentioned that a $2 million donation would fund the entire community outreach wing, I knew what I had to do. I'd like to make a donation, I said. $2 million with specific conditions. Sarah's eyes widened. That's incredibly generous. May I ask about your connection to the university? I'm a current student, I replied. But I'd like the donation to remain anonymous until graduation day. Can you arrange for the announcement to be made during the commencement ceremony? The next few months were a whirlwind of legal paperwork, financial transfers, and careful planning. I liquidated my business savings, took out strategic loans against future earnings, and structured the donation through a private foundation I established. The legal work was complex, but my philosophy coursework had taught me to think systematically about complex problems. By March, the donation was complete. Construction on the new library wing began immediately, with completion scheduled for fall semester. The university was thrilled, but honored my request for anonymity until graduation. Meanwhile, my family continued their familiar patterns. Emma announced her engagement to a fellow engineer, complete with a celebration dinner and congratulations from extended family. David qualified for Olympic trials, earning local newspaper coverage and another family celebration. When I mentioned I was graduating summa cum laude with honors in both my majors, The response was muted congratulations before conversation shifted to Emma's wedding planning. "At least you'll finish college," Mom said with forced positivity. "Now you can start thinking about real career options." 2 weeks before graduation, I received the final construction photos from Sarah Rodriguez. The new library wing was beautiful, bright, modern, filled with natural light and designed to welcome learners of all ages. The community programs were already accepting applications, with overwhelming response from local families. "Your donation will literally change lives," Sarah wrote in her email. "Thank you for believing in our mission." But my parents remained unaware of everything I'd built. To them, I was still Marcus, the disappointment, the one who'd wasted 4 years studying impractical subjects while his siblings achieved real success. Graduation morning arrived with typical family dynamics. Emma and David flew in for the ceremony, their achievements dominating breakfast conversation. My mother spent 20 minutes discussing Emma's wedding registry while my father scrolled through David's latest swimming videos. "Try to look professional in the photos," Mom instructed as we prepared to leave for the ceremony. Emma's colleagues might see them on social media. The irony wasn't lost on me. In a few hours, everyone would understand exactly how professional I'd become. The graduation ceremony took place in the university's main amphitheater, a grand space that could hold 8,000 people. Families filled the tiered seating while graduates assembled on the field in neat rows organized by school and major. I sat with my fellow English and philosophy graduates, listening to the opening remarks and watching families in the stands. 3 rows up I could see my parents. Dad checked his phone periodically while Mom pointed out other families to Emma, commenting on their clothing choices and apparent success levels. David took selfies with his girlfriend, both of them looking slightly bored by the academic ceremony. The first part of the ceremony proceeded predictably. The provost spoke about academic achievement, the student body president delivered remarks about our shared journey, and various deans recognized graduating students from their schools. I walked across the stage when my name was called, shaking hands with Dean Martinez and receiving my diploma folder. The applause was polite but unremarkable. From the stands, I heard Emma's enthusiastic cheering. She was genuinely proud, even if our parents viewed my degree as a consolation prize. "Marcus Chen," the announcer said, graduating summa cum laude with dual honors in English literature and philosophy. My parents clapped politely. I caught my mother leaning over to whisper something to Emma, probably commenting on how long it had taken me to reach this basic milestone. What happened next changed everything. Dean Martinez returned to the podium for the final remarks. "Before we conclude today's ceremony," he announced, "I have a special recognition to share with our community." The amphitheater quieted as graduates and families focused their attention on the stage. 3 months ago, our university received an extraordinary gift, Dean Martinez continued. An anonymous donor contributed $2 million to fund our new community learning center, a library wing that will serve not just our students, but thousands of community members who need access to educational resources. Murmurs of appreciation rippled through the crowd. I remained seated, heart pounding, knowing what came next. This donation represents the largest single gift from a community member in our university's history, the dean continued. Today, our anonymous donor has asked to be recognized publicly for the first time. My parents were paying attention now, probably curious about which wealthy family was being honored. The donor's vision was simple but powerful. Education should be accessible to everyone, regardless of economic circumstances. This new facility will provide literacy programs, technology access, and educational support to over 10,000 community members annually. I could see Sarah Rodriguez standing in the wings, holding a large ceremonial check and a bouquet of flowers. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dean Martinez announced, "I'd like to ask our donor to join me on stage. Marcus Chen, please come forward." The amphitheater fell completely silent. 8,000 people turned to look at the graduating students, trying to locate the person whose name had just been called. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady, and began walking toward the stage. The silence stretched, broken only by my footsteps and the distant sound of construction equipment from the new library wing. From the stands, I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath. "That's our Marcus," she whispered, confusion evident in her voice. As I climbed the steps to the platform, Dean Martinez beamed with pride. Marcus Chen, class of 2024, whose extraordinary generosity will impact our community for generations to come. The crowd erupted in applause, but I was focused on the family section. My parents sat frozen, staring at me with expressions I'd never seen before. Emma had tears in her eyes, her hand covering her mouth in shock. David had lowered his phone, finally paying complete attention. Sarah Rodriguez approached with the ceremonial elements of the recognition. Dean Martinez handed me a beautiful plaque commemorating the donation, while Sarah presented flowers and posed for photos. "Would you like to say a few words?" Dean Martinez asked, offering me the microphone. I accepted it with trembling hands and looked out at the sea of faces. Graduates, families, faculty, all waiting to hear from the 24-year-old who had just been revealed as a major philanthropist. "Thank you," I began, my voice stronger than I'd expected. When I started college 4 years ago, my parents worried that studying literature and philosophy wasn't practical. They thought I was wasting time on subjects that wouldn't lead to real success. I found my family in the crowd. My mother was crying now, though I couldn't tell if it was pride, shock, or regret. But what I learned in my literature courses was how to understand human stories, human needs, human potential. Philosophy taught me to think critically about social problems and ethical responsibilities. These impractical subjects gave me the tools to build a consulting business that serves nonprofits across California. The applause grew stronger. I could see my professors in the faculty section, beaming with pride. More importantly, these studies helped me understand that success isn't just about personal achievement. It's about using your abilities to create opportunities for others. This library will serve students like me who need quiet spaces to study, but it will also serve working parents trying to earn their GEDs, children who don't have books at home, and seniors learning to use computers. I paused, looking directly at my parents. Sometimes the most practical thing you can do is follow your passion and use it to serve others. That's what real success looks like. The standing ovation was thunderous. I handed the microphone back to Dean Martinez and returned to my seat, legs shaking from adrenaline. But the ceremony wasn't over. Dean Martinez had one more surprise. The university has voted to name the new facility the Marcus Chen Community Learning Center, he announced. A permanent reminder that education transforms not just individuals, but entire communities. If the previous applause was loud, this was deafening. The entire graduating class stood up, followed by their families, followed by the faculty. 8,000 people on their feet, celebrating not just my donation, but the principle it represented. I sat in my chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just happened. For 4 years I'd felt invisible, dismissed, undervalued. Now, my name would be permanently attached to a building that would serve my community for decades. When the ceremony concluded and graduates began finding their families, I walked slowly toward the family section. My parents stood at the bottom of the stairs, looking uncertain for the first time in my memory. My mother reached me first. "Marcus," she whispered, "we had no idea." My father looked stunned. $2 million? How is that possible? Before I could answer, Emma engulfed me in a hug. "I'm so proud of you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I had no idea what you were building." David, usually confident and articulate, seemed speechless. "Bro," he finally managed, "that was incredible." Other families began approaching, congratulating me and expressing amazement at the recognition. Parents who had previously overlooked me now wanted to know about my business, my future plans, my path to success. But I was focused on my own parents, who stood slightly apart from the crowd, still processing what they'd witnessed. "The consulting business," my father said slowly. "When did that start?" "Junior year," I replied. "I've been working with nonprofits, helping them with strategic planning and grant writing. The skills I learned in my literature and philosophy courses turned out to be exactly what they needed." My mother shook her head in disbelief. "Why didn't you tell us?" It was a fair question and one I'd been preparing to answer for months. "Because you'd already decided my choices were wrong," I said gently. Every conversation about my studies included criticism or suggestions to change direction. I needed space to build something without constant doubt and disapproval. The hurt in their eyes was evident, but so was the dawning recognition of their own role in my silence. "We thought we were helping," Mom said quietly. "We just wanted you to be secure, successful." "I am successful," I replied. "Just not in the way you expected." Over the following hours, as we attended the reception and took family photos, the dynamics began shifting. Emma asked detailed questions about my business model and client base. David wanted to understand how I'd managed to save $2 million while still in college. My parents listened quietly, absorbing information about a son they realized they'd never really known. The photos from that day tell the story. In the earlier shots taken before the ceremony, I look tense and uncertain while my family appears confident and proud of Emma and David. In the later photos taken after the library announcement, everyone's expressions have changed. I look confident and proud while my parents appear humbled and reflective. That evening at the family dinner they'd planned to celebrate my graduation, the conversation was unlike any we'd ever had. Instead of defending my choices or explaining my plans, I found myself in the position of strength, sharing insights about social entrepreneurship and discussing my vision for expanding my consulting work. I've been invited to speak at 3 conferences this summer, I mentioned casually. Organizations want to understand how to blend profit with social impact. My father leaned forward. What kind of organizations? Universities, foundations, corporate social responsibility departments. Turns out there's significant demand for consultants who understand both business strategy and social justice frameworks. Emma smiled. Philosophy and literature aren't looking so impractical now, are they, Dad? My father had the grace to look embarrassed. Marcus, I owe you an apology. We've been wrong about your path and we've been wrong in how we've supported you. My mother nodded. We're proud of Emma's engineering success and David's athletic achievements because we understand those paths. But we never took time to understand yours. It was the first time either of them had acknowledged their bias, and it opened space for a conversation we should have had years earlier. I don't need you to understand everything I do, I said. But I need you to trust that I'm capable of making good decisions, even when they don't match your expectations. The weeks following graduation brought a series of adjustments. My parents began asking genuine questions about my work rather than offering unsolicited advice about career changes. They started sharing news of my achievements with extended family and friends, something they'd never done before. Emma and I grew closer as she expressed genuine interest in my consulting approach. Her engineering background and my philosophical training created interesting collaborative possibilities. We began discussing ways to apply social impact frameworks to technology projects. David, surprisingly, became one of my strongest supporters. He started sharing my story with his Stanford teammates, many of whom were interested in careers that combined athletic discipline with social entrepreneurship. Most importantly, my parents began recognizing that success can take many forms. They still worried about practical concerns like financial security and career stability, but they stopped assuming that unconventional paths were automatically wrong. The Marcus Chen Community Learning Center opened 3 months after graduation. The dedication ceremony drew over 500 community members, including many of the families who would benefit from the programs. I spoke briefly about the importance of accessible education, but the real stars were the community members who shared how the facility would impact their lives. Maria Santos, a single mother completing her GED, talked about finally having a quiet space to study while her children attended the center's after-school programs. James Wilson, a military veteran transitioning to civilian life, described the technology training that would help him pursue a new career in web development. 8-year-old Aisha Johnson read a poem she'd written in the center's youth literacy program. My parents attended the dedication, sitting in the front row and listening to speaker after speaker describe the center's impact. During the reception, my mother approached Maria Santos and had a long conversation about the challenges of returning to education as an adult. "Your son created something beautiful," Maria told my mother. "This place is going to change everything for families like mine." Later, my mother told me it was the first time she'd truly understood what my donation meant beyond the impressive dollar amount. "I saw your success," she said. "But today I saw your impact." The business continued growing throughout the summer. My client base expanded to include national organizations, and I hired 2 part-time assistants to help manage the workload. By fall, I was earning more annually than many of my peers who had chosen practical majors. But more importantly, I'd found a career that aligned with my values and utilized my skills. The critical thinking abilities I'd developed in philosophy courses proved invaluable for strategic planning. The analytical and communication skills from literature studies were essential for grant writing and program evaluation. My parents gradually acknowledged what Professor Martinez had tried to tell me years earlier. Success doesn't always look like what others expect. During Thanksgiving dinner that year, the family dynamics had shifted completely. Emma shared updates about her engineering projects, David discussed his training progress, and I talked about my consulting work and community impact. But instead of competing for attention or approval, we found ourselves supporting each other's different paths. "I've been thinking," my father said during dessert, "about starting a foundation focused on healthcare access in underserved communities. Marcus, would you be interested in helping with the strategic planning?" It was the first time he'd asked for my professional expertise, recognizing that my skills might be valuable for his own philanthropic goals. "I'd love to help," I replied. "But I think you might be surprised by what effective philanthropy requires. It's not just about writing checks." He smiled. "I'm beginning to understand that. Your approach with the library, the research, the strategic thinking, the community engagement, that's exactly what I need to learn." 6 months later, we launched the Chen Family Foundation together. My parents provided the funding, but I developed the framework for identifying effective programs and measuring social impact. Emma contributed technological solutions for program delivery, while David designed fitness and wellness components for our healthcare initiatives. What started as a family disappointment had become a family collaboration, with each of us contributing our unique strengths to shared goals. The most profound change, though, was in how my parents understood success itself. They began talking about Emma's work not just in terms of salary and prestige, but in terms of how her aerospace innovations could benefit society. They started asking David about his plans for using his athletic platform to promote youth fitness and education. And they stopped apologizing for my choices or suggesting alternative careers. Instead, they introduced me as our son Marcus, who runs a social impact consulting firm and funded the new Community Learning Center at UC Davis. 1 year after graduation, I was invited to give the commencement address at UC Davis. Standing at the same podium where Dean Martinez had announced my donation, I looked out at a new class of graduates and their families. "1 year ago, I sat where you're sitting," I began, listening to my parents whisper about what a disappointment I was. They worried that studying literature and philosophy was impractical, that I was wasting my education on subjects that wouldn't lead to real success. I found my parents in the family section smiling proudly. But what I discovered is that success isn't about choosing the most obviously practical path. It's about developing your abilities and using them to create value for others. Sometimes the most practical thing you can do is follow your passion and apply it to solving real problems. The applause was warm and encouraging, but I was focused on one specific message. If you're sitting here today feeling like the family disappointment, if your choices don't match others' expectations, if you're pursuing something that seems impractical to people who love you, remember that they can only see the beginning of your story. The middle and end might surprise everyone, including yourself. After the ceremony, dozens of students and parents approached me with questions about unconventional career paths, social entrepreneurship, and following passion while building security. Many shared stories similar to mine, feeling dismissed or undervalued because their interests didn't align with family expectations. But the conversation that mattered most was with my own parents. "We're sorry it took us so long to see," my mother said as we walked across campus toward the Marcus Chen Community Learning Center. "We thought we were protecting you from disappointment, but we were actually creating it." My father nodded. "We measured your worth by Emma and David's achievements instead of recognizing your own path. That was our failure, not yours. You weren't wrong to want security and success for me," I replied. "You just had a narrow definition of what those look like." We spent an hour touring the learning center, watching community members of all ages engaged in various programs. The facility was bustling with activity. Children in the literacy program, adults learning computer skills, teenagers getting homework help, seniors participating in book clubs. "This is your legacy," my father said, watching an elderly man help a young girl with her reading. Not just the building, but the connections, the opportunities, the lives changed. As we prepared to leave campus, I reflected on the journey from disappointment to recognition. The transformation hadn't just been in my circumstances. I'd been building success all along. The real change was in how my family understood and valued that success. Driving home, my mother asked about my future plans. Did I want to expand the consulting business? Was I considering graduate school? What about marriage and family? But her questions had a different tone now. She wasn't asking because she doubted my choices or wanted to redirect my path. She was asking because she was genuinely interested in my life and proud of what I was building. I'm exactly where I want to be, I replied. Building something meaningful, using my skills to create opportunities for others, proving that unconventional paths can lead to extraordinary outcomes. 2 years later, as I write this story, the business has grown to serve clients in 12 states. The Chen Family Foundation has funded educational programs serving over 5,000 students. Emma and I are collaborating on technology solutions for nonprofit organizations. David is using his athletic success to promote youth development programs. Most importantly, my parents have become genuine supporters rather than skeptical observers. They brag about my achievements to their friends, ask thoughtful questions about my work, and trust my judgment about major decisions. The family disappointment became the family success story, not because I changed direction, but because they learned to see the value in the direction I'd chosen all along. If you're reading this as someone who feels undervalued or misunderstood by people who love you, remember that external validation is less important than internal conviction. Build something meaningful, serve others authentically, and trust that the right people will eventually recognize your worth. Sometimes the most profound success comes from proving that the path others couldn't see was exactly the right one for you. Have you ever felt like the family disappointment despite your accomplishments? How did you find the courage to pursue your path despite others' doubts? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this journey of turning disappointment into triumph resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the people who believe in you least can motivate you most. Not to earn their approval but to prove to yourself just how extraordinary your unconventional path can become.